Welcome to the Celestine Light Esoteric Mystery School for Part 2 on Guardian Angels that we're going to be talking about today. And Sheliana is going to be sharing some of her experiences with us, so I'm going to turn the time over to her.
Hi, I'm Sheliana, and I'd like to share a couple of experiences that I've had with my guardian angels. These two experiences are probably the most profound, or affected me the most profoundly in my life. They both happened within 6 months of each other. The first incident was when I was 17. It was the fall of 1974. And I had come home for the weekend from school, and I brought a friend with me. And we had decided to go to my old high school's basketball game. Well, we were running a little late, and it was a rainy evening. And being from a small town, we had dirt roads. So I was traveling a bit fast on that dirt road as we were heading to the game. And I just happened to look down at my speedometer for whatever reason and noticed that I was going a little fast, and I don't know if it was because I looked down, took my eyes off the road, or what, but the next thing I knew, we were fishtailing back and forth on the road, and I had lost control. And I remember going under the grass and literally bouncing over this drainage ditch. And in this particular area, it was wider and deeper than normal. And so we bounced over this drainage ditch and spun around and were able to get out of the car completely unharmed. Now, when the police arrived and asked me how fast I was going, and I related my speed, they told me that it was impossible for me to jump that distance with my car going 52 miles an hour. I should have been going 80 or 90 miles an hour in order to make that jump. And I told him I wasn't, and being from a small town, the advantage of that is that everybody knew everybody, so I just kind of got a slap on the wrist and didn't get a ticket. I was told to slow down next time, even though I totaled my car. But that incident really made me think a little bit deeper about the meaning of life, or behind the scenes, that there's deeper things going on than what we're led to believe. My next experience was about 6 months later. I was vacationing in Switzerland with my family, and we were there on a ski trip. I was fortunate enough to be able to bring a couple of friends of mine along. The fun thing about skiing in the springtime is it's warm enough that you don't need a coat, and you can work on your tan. That was before the days of worrying about skin cancer. And the unfortunate thing is that there are certain parts of the mountain that with the sunshine can melt during the day, and then at night it'll freeze. And so there are conditions that aren't best for skiing. Well, we had our plan set for this particular day, and we got to the spot where it said it was hazardous, but we didn't think anything of it. We could handle it. So we went around the sign, and we got to an area where there were other stupid people that had gone that route as well, and we noticed that they weren't skiing. Instead they were digging their skis into the side of the mountain and sidestepping down. Now, this spot was a very narrow catwalk that had a hairpin turn. So if you didn't make that turn, it was about 1,000-foot drop. And there were no guardrails to catch you. So I decided I should do the same thing, but before I could start, I was on the ground. I fell. And instead of hitting the ground like you normally do, it was like a ice rink slanted. So I just started sliding, and there was nothing to grab onto. It was ice. I tried grabbing onto a lady's skis, but she wasn't going to let me take her down, so she started hitting me with her poles, and that kept me away. So I was heading for that end, and I don't remember having any particular thoughts in my mind other than, well, this might be it. Next thing I knew, I felt like I was shoved to the side, and I landed on a ledge that was just big enough for me to fit on, about 10 feet down. So it was those two experiences, the second one in particular, where I knew there was more to life than just what my eyes could see. I felt the presence of someone I didn't know at the time, but as I discovered on my spiritual journey that this was my guardian, or one of my guardian angels, and these two experiences were really the launching of my spiritual search, seeking the light, which culminated in finding Celestine Light over 30 years later. And even in that discovery, realizing that that was just the doorway to greater light and knowledge.
Thank you, Shiliana, for sharing that with us. I think one thing that people really need to realize from the last story that you talked about is that you actually did go flying off that 1,000-foot drop cliff. And so that ledge you talked about, 10 feet below, that was 10 feet below. But for your friends who were watching and screaming at the top, they probably thought everybody probably thought that you were dying. And that because they saw you disappear over the lip and head down that 1,000-foot drop. And so to find that you were actually on a ledge somehow below, just 10 feet, so the ski patrol was able to come rescue you, that was a big surprise to everybody, probably including you.
Yeah.
When Shiliana and I first got together, our very first date was
You know,
also...
you tried to kill me?
Yeah, it was almost our last date because of my stupidity, she almost ended up dying. Because one of the things that I like to do is rappel, and I have all kinds of rappelling gear. And so I said, well, I'll take Shiliana rappelling here in Ashland, Oregon, over by Immigrant Lake at a nice little cliff that I know about. And this cliff is a great spot because to get to the top, you have to pass through a dimensional portal, which is a cool energy to have to go through on your way to the top. But that's another story. But in any case, we got up to the top, and one of the things that I've always loved about Shiliana is her long, beautiful hair. And any smart person rappelling knows that if you have long hair, you better tie it up, put it under a hat, tuck it into your shirt, do something like that. But I was so enraptured with Shiliana and her long hair, I didn't think about that. And so I put her in the smallest harness I have, because she's pretty slim, put her in the smallest harness that I have, hooked up the carabiners, put the rope in, and normally the carabiners are going to be about at waist height at that point, because you're going to put your hand behind, your right hand behind your back to brake yourself as you're going down. In her case, because her upper body is pretty short, she got these beautiful long legs, so because of her small waist and the small size and the short upper body, her carabiners were like up here, much higher than they should have been, but still let her grow off the edge. She got about halfway down. I went down first to make sure everything was fine, came back up, and it's her turn. She went down, and she didn't go all the way down. About halfway down, I hear, "Help!" And I said, "Help, what's going on?" So I kind of peer over the edge. "What's the matter down there?" And she says, "I'm stuck." I said, "Well, just keep going." She says, "I can't, my hair is strangling me." I go, hair is strangling? I mean, this was confusing, but what had happened is that her long hair that was hanging loose, that shouldn't have been hanging loose, had got wound up inside the carabiners and the rope, and hair is slippery where the rope has meant to have resistance. Hair just keeps sliding and sliding, so this piece of hair had got caught under her neck, and the carabiners were up here on her neck, and she was trying to break herself to not go down, but she was still slipping, and every time she slipped, it got tighter and tighter and tighter. And so she needed some help. because she couldn't hold herself up. She wasn't able to hold herself up anymore, and her own weight was pulling her down. What did you think when that was happening?
Actually, surprisingly, I was totally calm, even though I was finding it more and more difficult to breathe. This was becoming tighter and tighter. I didn't go into a state of panic. I knew everything would be okay. And now I know that was my guardian angels right there with me, helping me feel that calm feeling.
And her guardian angel did something very special. It's hard for me even to relate the story after all these years without getting choked up about it. From where I was on the top for me to get to her, I couldn't go down the rope because that might make her go down further. So the only way I could get to her would be to go climbing back down the cliff, free climbing, and then free climb back up to where she was. And that was going to take me at least 10 minutes to do. She didn't have 10 minutes. There was no way she could hold herself up anymore. She was already slipping every minute, every second that was going by. It was a challenge to hold herself in position. And she probably would have died at that point of strangulation if everything had been the way it should have been, the way it would have normally been. But it wasn't normal on this day. As I looked down the cliff, there was a young man at the base of the cliff. Now this is a young man that was known to me. His name was Tristan, and we lived in a rural area, and his family lived some blocks down the street, and he was a senior at the high school that our daughter attended. Now Tristan was a very special young man. He didn't have many friends because it was difficult for him to communicate. From birth, he hadn't been able to speak or hear. All he could do is see. And what he saw was that Samara was having a big problem and she couldn't descend down. He couldn't hear what we were saying back and forth to each other. So he couldn't know what the exact problem was, but he could see she was not descending any further, and he could see that there was a problem with her neck. Now, why was Tristan there at that particular exact moment, right when we needed him? I know that our guardian angels brought him there to that spot, and he acted. While I started to go down, he climbed up, and in just a few minutes, he was to Samara. He grabbed her around her legs, and he lifted her up, and he was standing on a little ledge about 6 inches wide on one foot. That's all he could fit, is just the 1 foot on this little ledge, and he was holding her up on that little ledge, and he held her there until I arrived, which is about 10 minutes later, 8 minutes later maybe. All that time he was supporting her weight, straining and straining and straining. His guardian angel had to be helping him to be able to hold her weight that long on 1 foot on a little teeny ledge on the edge of a cliff.
And I should mention that time, it was like we were suspended. And time was not time. It just was. Before we knew it, he was there.
But the actual time that transpired was probably at least 8 minutes. So right away when I got there, the first thing I saw was this big rat's nest of hair and rope and carabiners all tied up together. First thing I told Shiliana is, I'm sorry, sweetie, but I've got to cut your hair.
No! Can't get my hair!
I loved her hair. She loved her hair. It had to go. But she said that wasn't an option. She was still alive at this point. She wanted to try to get herself out of this situation without cutting her hair. Again, I think the guardian angels came in and helped. I really didn't see any possible way that mix up of hair and rope could ever come undone. But as soon as I touched it and started pulling it, it all came undone. She got to keep her hair. We all got down safe and sound. The only side effect of it is that on that little ledge that we were on was full of poison oak. We got poison oak so badly, I won't even go into that, but it was the worst case of poison oak you can imagine. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. Please like my channel, subscribe to my channel. You'll be notified when the new videos come out. We are coming out with a new one every week. Part 3 for Guardian Angels will be out next week. So until then, namaste, my brothers and sisters. We'll see you next week.